guys, so my name is Emily Petch, and for my artist video project I actually decided to do Leonardo da Vinci, so here we go. So Leonardo da Vinci was born April 15th in 1452. He was born in Ancio, Tuscany, now known as Italy. He was the only child of Caterina di Mio Lippi. She was a peasant woman, and Sir Perio, who was a Florentine notary and lawyer. They went on to actually father or have 17 other children with different partners, but Leonardo was their only child together. Leonardo da Vinci was self-educated. He dabbled in many different courses of study. He dabbled in nature, anatomy, architecture, weaponry, but he was most commonly known for his inventions, architecture, and paintings. He was raised by his father and his uncle, and was actually sent to apprentice Andrea del Versace of Florentine at the age of 15. During this time, they actually created many works together. One of the ones that I had found was the Baptism of Christ, and again, as you can see, it's something that they had created together. Leonardo da Vinci was offered to join the Painters Guild in 1472, but denied it and became an independent master in 1478. His first commissioned work was the Adoration of Magi, which in 1482, but he actually never completed it because he relocated to Milan. While in Milan, he actually served the Sforza clan and served as an engineer, painter, architect, designer, and of court festivals and sculptor. During this time and before, he actually had started his notebooks in the 1490s, and his notebooks were filled with many different courses of study he was interested in as far as, again, anatomy, architecture, and really just everything. While in Milan, he actually created his work, The Last Supper, between 1495 and 1498. And I believe he would have stayed in Milan longer, but in 1499, it was actually invaded by the French. Da Vinci actually then relocated to Florence, and during his time in Florence, he painted the Mona Lisa in 1503. Da Vinci then returned to Milan in 1506, but left and went to France in 1516 to serve for the king as the premier painter, engineer, and architect to the king. And the king at the time, or the ruler, was Francis I. Leonardo da Vinci died in 1519 at the age of 67 in Klaus, which is now known as Klaus Lucé, and that's really most of his life. The most historical events, I picked 3 that I thought were the most important, and this was a time of age of exploration. So everything that the events that mainly changed the world and the course of travel, I picked. So the first one would be Bartholomew Diaz, who rounded the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. Next, I picked Columbus reaches the Bahamas, which was 1492. And lastly, Vasco da Gama, who reached India in 1498. The art movements that were occurring at the time were many vast ones. The Renaissance is actually known as the rebirth. So there was a lot of different ideas that had come to play during this time. One of the big influencers would be St. Francis, who actually rejected the formal scholasticism of the prevailing Christian theology and more praised the beauty and spiritual value of nature. A lot of the artists of the time actually took to this very largely, and this made them have more of an appreciation for the pleasures around them and pleasure in the world. One of the biggest elements during this time was naturalism, which was created by Mascao. Another big artist or big influencer at the time was Giotto di Bonte. He created the new pictorial style that depended on simple structures and psychological penetration rather than flat linear decoratism and hierarchical compositions. The next artists of the time were Piero della Francesca, Pallaviolo, and Andre del Versace, who really pressed forward with researching into linear and aerial perspective and anatomy, which again created the idea more of the scientific naturalism or naturalism in general. The Renaissance was the time that really just revolved around, I believe, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. Leonardo da Vinci was actually known as the Renaissance man, and there was just no course of study that was foreign to him. So he paved a really big way for the Renaissance time. Michelangelo created or took pleasure in, what would be the word? Making the way for creative power. He thought that was a very big part of Renaissance and just painting in general. And then Raphael's worked at expressing classical spirit in painting. Leonardo da Vinci believed mankind's most important sense was seeing. He actually believed that science and art were complementary of one another and not two different subjects. He believed that seeing was the most important of all because, as you know, he had a lot of different courses of study. He belonged to the art movement of naturalism, and he really paved the way of Renaissance art in general. Summaries of his work are going to be the Vitruvian Man, The Last Supper, and the Mona Lisa. Since Leonardo da Vinci had so many vast courses of study, less than 24 of his paintings actually exist. So the one things that I noticed in his paintings, I chose the Last Supper to really talk about for both elements and principles. So for elements, I noticed shape. There's a lot of rectangular shapes in this image and even some more triangular shapes, as you can see right here. And I thought that was a big part of what Leonardo da Vinci was doing. Another one would be space. He's got a very open space, and it's not closed off. It's very inviting, I would say. The implied depth, I would say, because these people are more dragged forward, and then you have the walls that look farther, and it's almost like a one-point perspective in a way, because they're going away from you, it seems. And then you have motion, which you have the people talking, and they're talking about Jesus, or they're pointing at Jesus, or just having a conversation. The light, I would say, comes in for the background, and even just the painting in general is a very high-key painting, because it does have darks, but it has more light, I would say, than dark. Color plays a big role, because it actually shows a lot of the color in Jesus's, what he's wearing, and even just some of the disciples that are there, because that also places a big contrast between the light and the dark in the background. And then lastly, texture, I would say, because you can see that the garments are made, what they're made of, or they could be what they could be made of. And I think Leonardo da Vinci does a good job at creating that texture for those items. Then principles, I believe, would be unity and variety. It's a very unifying image, and it doesn't seem to be disconnected, but there is variety in the painting, so it's not boring. He doesn't pick the same things. He does create that variety in it. He does a great job as far as balancing. So he actually does a good job at the walls being balanced with each other, and the light in the room, and even just the amount of people on each side is balanced. He emphasizes Jesus extraordinarily. I believe Jesus is probably in the most colorful clothes to, again, bring emphasis to him. And then it would be directional forces, which you have people talking about Jesus, looking at Jesus, pointing at Jesus, which again brings your eye back to the center, and even the light in the background again creates that Jesus is the center of the image. Then you have that contrast, as I was talking about before, which is going to be the contrast between the lights and the darks and the color and the flat wall and things of that nature. So then the only criticism that I had found for Da Vinci was actually on his Salvator Mundi, which the speculation was that it was not worth $450 million because over the last 500 years, it has been retouched so many times that little to none of Da Vinci's original handiwork is left. So a lot of the critics say that it's not worth that much money. I personally agree, especially just because it doesn't have Da Vinci's original handiwork, I don't think, intact as much anymore. So I definitely think that is a big deal as far as it not being worth as much. And that's kind of it. And my We're Excited page. And thanks for watching.